Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Recently, I had a conversation with Jared Trueheart from the website Legends of Men. In fact, I actually had two conversations. The first was supposed to be uploaded in the podcast format. However, the recording equipment failed to process the audio correctly, so we swiftly decided to record and start again. I hope you enjoy this second attempt at a podcast, which has been separated into 3 parts where we explore different topics and ideas. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this premiere podcast. My esteemed guest today is Jared Trueheart from the Legends of Men website. How are you today, Jared? And could you please tell us something about your work?
I'm super, thanks for asking. Over at Legends of Men, I write primarily about masculinity in fiction and also in culture. And what I like to do with a lot of my writing is take a deep dive into fiction that really targets men and pull out the insights and life lessons and make those as obvious as I can.
Excellent. I will put a link in the description so that you can all access this website. I can definitely recommend some of the articles in there. Right, why don't we just get down to it, as our nominal topic today is Star Wars and the Star Wars saga, although I have the suspicion that we'll end off going on detours depending on how things happen, as there is quite a lot happening in the world, actually. So Jared, how many of the Star Wars films have you seen, first of all?
Well, I've seen all of them except the Rise of Skywalker. However, I think it's good to note that when the Rise of Skywalker came out, I watched a lot of YouTube video reviews of it, and these things were like hours long. And by the end of watching all those reviews, I feel like I've already seen the movie, and I already don't like it.
I can tell you that you've missed absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. It's quite funny how bad it is. And no one expected it to be good, because I went to see it on the first day in the cinema at I think it was a 10 a.m. showing. First day it came out. It had a midnight showing, but anyway, I was in the cinema, and there were a few people there considering that it was a 10 a.m. showing. And a couple of people had popcorn, etc., etc. But the atmosphere was so dead. Everyone was just there to see it, to see it end, just to get it over with. The only people who seemed to be having fun were a bunch of younger people who came in to laugh at the film.
And how was the atmosphere when you went to see The Force Awakens?
Oh wow, completely different. I mean, first the cinema was packed. Second, there was a buzz, an excitement, almost a hunger even for what was about to be shown. And it's interesting to note that most people at the time did enjoy The Force Awakens. Most people actually legitimately enjoyed it until with the benefit of hindsight, they saw that it was a very mediocre rehash, and A New Hope did it better anyway.
Yeah, it seems like with the new trilogy, anybody who likes it uses the same phrase, which is you have to just turn off your brain and enjoy what you're seeing. And out of the 3, The Force Awakens requires you to turn off your brain the least in order to enjoy it. And it seems like you just have to be a real brain dead vegetable to enjoy the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, you have to be the ultimate consumer, as the internet jargon is, to enjoy it. And then I mean, just images of that guy who was crying when he was watching the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, the first one which came out. It's like, should I feel sorry for him? I know this is a detour, but should I feel sorry for the poor man?
Well, that's a great question, because so first of all, the guy is married, which really blew my mind. And
Whoa.
yeah, exactly. So we also learned later, like a week or two after his crying video went big, that he had lost like 20 something pounds by doing Zumba at the gym. Do you know what Zumba is? You have Zumba in the UK?
Yeah, there are a few places which do Zumba in the UK.
Well,
Uh,
here in America, I'll tell you, my wife does Zumba to stay fit. And if you go to a Zumba class, it's like 110% women. And if there's any men in the Zumba classes, they are flamboyantly gay. So this guy's choice to lose weight by doing Zumba, I think, is a statement unto him. That's part number one. But also, people who, I'll say this about any man, rather. Any man who puts too much of the, invest too much emotion into the media they consume, I think they have low dangerously. And that's what I think happened.
yeah, although I have to say he probably wasn't born a consumer.
They're definitely made. They're not born, and they're kind of shaped by this. But uh, again, we're going off on a little detour here, but it's relevant to Star Wars super fans, which is I kind of think that the guy grew up without a strong father figure, because if you have a strong father figure, somebody that strong father figure has got to say, look, dude, you're putting too much of your emotional well-being into the fate of Star Wars movies. Why don't you go out and play football in the streets with your friends or something?
Yeah, that's a good a theory as any. Well, let's leave the poor gentleman alone.
Yeah, he's been beat up enough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no one took it easy on him after that video. Uh, but anyway, we'll leave the poor man alone. Since you're the guest, I'll let you talk first and ask you, I suppose, a big question. Just what what do you think went wrong with the saga, with the Star Wars saga? So many people love the original trilogy. The fandom is split, I think, between people who enjoy the prequels and people who don't. And the sequels, I think, like about maybe 80 or 90% of Star Wars fans dislike the sequel trilogy in some way. So, especially now after The Rise of Skywalker came out, because there were Star Wars fans or just people in general who liked The Last Jedi because it was different. So, what do you think went wrong?
Sure. So we'll go back to the start, the A New Hope, and the first trilogy, the original trilogy, and what made it so great. When you have a really fantastic setting, and it's got really fantastic out of this world creatures that is nothing like planet Earth as we know it, you really have to have main characters that are relatable, and the story of their lives has to be believable. And what was great about the first trilogy was that it was a pretty standard hero's journey story. If I remember correctly, George Lucas even had Joseph Campbell consult him on the films. So, Luke Skywalker starts off as an ordinary guy. Through the hero's journey, he becomes a Jedi. He fulfills his destiny, or in this case, Darth Vader's destiny to destroy the Emperor, or whatever that destiny was. The long story short, it was believable that Luke Skywalker could save the day. And it was a satisfying ending, more or less, to that trilogy. Fast forward to the prequels, and the prequels already have an inherent problem, which is that you know the ending, and the main character does not become a hero. So on the one hand, you had a somewhat believable story of how young Anakin becomes Darth Vader, and you've got some cool characters, which is very important, at least because you want to like them. And it had some plagues to it. It had some things that were real detriments, like the romance and the writing of the romance and some of that acting.
You're not like sand.
Yeah, you got to tell the whole quote.
Oh goodness. Let's see if I can remember. I don't like sand. It's rough, it's coarse, it's dry, and it gets everywhere. But you're not like sand.
Yeah.
And then he creepily touches her back with his hand. I mean,
So,
oh my word.
yeah.
I think I'd call the police if I were in her situation, to be honest.
Yeah, what a thing to say to a woman. I don't like mud. It's sticky and thick. You're not like mud, though.
Oh well.
Yeah.
Hey, well, well, gentlemen. Well, for all the gentlemen in my audience, could you try that, please, and come back to us and see if it works?
Yeah, let us know how many panties drop.
Now,
Okay,
now, 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 keep it within marriage, people.
so that was the problem with the prequels, but the sequels, there was no. It was even more fantastic than the original trilogy, but there were no characters that you could relate to, and there were very few that you wanted to win, and especially by the end of The Last Jedi, you kind of wanted them all to die. But the main character, who's Rey is her name,
Yes.
she starts off, and she's supposed to, the tension of the films, especially because you know it's going to be a trilogy. The tension of the films is supposed to be that at the beginning of when we first meet her, she's too weak to beat the bad guy. And by the end of the third trilogy, she is supposed to have grown enough to beat the bad guy. And the tension comes from, did she grow enough? That's how great stories go. And really, whatever your problems in life are, just to get it back to a human level, whatever your problems in life are, that's the great tension of life is, can you grow enough to rise to the occasion to beat your own problem? Ray already has powers that are strong enough to beat the bad guys by the end of the first film, and she didn't earn them. She didn't have to work for them. So already we can't relate to her by the second film, and there were just so many more problems with the films after that. For example, most of the characters by the third film were completely unnecessary, and characters just kept getting added, and there was no rhyme or reason or logical progression that took us to the start of the first film to the end of the third. And this is the main flaw of the most recent sequel trilogy.
Okay. This is I have my own thoughts, but I think I would like to delve in a bit here. So you're saying that you think the characters are the main problem.
The characters and the overall story structure.
Okay. So a lot of people, especially online, they'll write sometimes under my videos, but under loads of videos about Star Wars actually, they'll just write something akin to SJWs ruin Star Wars, progressivism ruin Star Wars, etc., etc. Um, so do you think what's happened with the characters and the story structure is connected to the progressivism? Or do you think that the diagnosis by these people is wrong?
Yes and no. For example, you can have a completely quote unquote woke film that makes sense from start to finish. It's a cohesive story, a logical progression, but it would just be filled with SJW propaganda. You can make a film like that, and I'm trying to think of one. I mean, I try to avoid these, so
Um,
but
I I could
go
give you
for
an
it.
example. Alita Battle Angel to some extent.
Oh, okay, the new James Cameron one.
Yes, I think it was directed by Michael Rodriguez. But I can't remember. I should know this though. Have you seen the film first of all?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. So for anyone who doesn't know as well, the film is about a essentially she's a robot, but I guess technically a cyborg because her brain at least seems to be in this robotic body. So it's about a young lady who's a cyborg, and she is an incredible fighter. Essentially, she's being trained to be a cyborg warrior, and it just follows. I mean, I don't want to discuss the plot of that film because I think it was written terribly, but um, in a sense that it was too long and events just happened, and yeah, but yeah, so it basically follows her journey and the things she's doing, and it ended with sequel bait.
Isn't that the worst?
Yeah, I was not happy when I left the cinema. Let's put it that way. I was just like, oh, okay, when is the next film coming out?
I think they did that with Avatar as well, and Avatar 2 still isn't out.
Avatar actually had no sequel bait, ironically, because Avatar just has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Actually,
Okay.
it's actually a complete film, so it doesn't need a sequel. It's just that James Cameron wants one.
Okay, that was it then.
So the reason I ask you this question and why I'm bringing up Alita Battle Angel is Alita Battle Angel could easily be described as a feminist film in similar to Captain Marvel, except for people like Alita Battle Angel and they don't like Captain Marvel because Captain Marvel as a film is it's preachy. It's the characters are unlikable. Um, it's just not enjoyable to watch. It's hardly entertaining. It actually brings problems to the expanded Marvel universe.
Have you seen Captain Marvel?
I have actually, yes.
Would you say that the plot of the movie is sensible? Does it make sense?
I forget precise details to be honest, but there are certainly things which, in the film's context, they make enough sense. But there's questions about what it does to the rest of the series. So it's
Oh,
basically implied that the Tesseract, for instance, was found in it was found in the downed plane which Captain America flew away from New York and flew into the North Pole, and that was discovered along with some Hydra equipment which Shield started working on. But in Captain Marvel, the Tesseract is found in like the 1970s and has been used by Shield for ages. So that messes things up. What exactly was happening with the Hydra tech and the Tesseract? Yeah, yeah, it's a mess, really. It can be explained, I'm sure, but it raises questions and doesn't really answer them. So it's like, oh, we'll just answer this in a comic, I suppose, or just pretend that it doesn't exist and let the fans answer it.
that's. I think that's what they have in mind for any discrepancies. But I'll bring it back to the main discussion, which was about did SJWs ruin uh, Star Wars, which is that you can have a cohesive plot like Captain Marvel if it's self-contained, not in the context of a bigger universe. You can have a cohesive plot, and it's just going to be the characters are just going to be unlikable. If it's like a rah feminism one, it's going to have a character like Captain Marvel, and she's going to be really bitchy, and she's going to be really smug, and it'll be unlikable, but it'll be a cohesive plot. Whereas Star Wars sequels, it had both. It had had the purple-haired well, this is a great purple versus pink-haired feminist.
I still maintain it's pink. I still maintain it's pink. My commenters dislike me for it, but I'm sorry, but under certain lights, it just does look like pink.
Yeah, well, maybe you know what? I wonder if they misdyed her hair certain scenes. Maybe just roll with it.
No, it's like they dyed it purple, and then the hair dye faded as they filmed over consecutive days, and they were like, you know what? Let's not bother.
Yes. When you
But
had a character like her, and they put the pink-haired feminist in charge of the armada or whatever it is, and she's just doing a really bad job. And then you have a man screaming good things in her ear, and she's just going, "No, I'm going to continue doing stupid things. You need to get out of here, hot shot, with your manhood and all that." And so it's the SJW stuff that they put in there. It doesn't help the film by any means, but the films do have deeper problems.
yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree because because I keep thinking of Alita Battle Angel, which is essentially, it's sort of moderate feminist, modern progressive, I suppose is the way to describe it. And it's presented well, and nobody really complained about it. But it's just obnoxious in Captain Marvel, for instance, which was the main competitor for Alita Battle Angel. So, with the main characters as well, the main characters I think are the major problem because I think I discussed this before, but uh, one of the big incomes for Star Wars, the biggest generators of money, is the toys. The toys make a lot of money, or they did, because no one's buying them now. They're not buying. They're not buying the sequel stuff.
Yeah, they're not buying it. They're not buying anything. They don't want to look at Ray's face.
I mean, well, world class BSs on YouTube just went round to the Toys R Us. He went to all the shops in his area which would sell toys, including petrol stations, which, in Great Britain they don't normally sell toys in petrol stations, but apparently that's a thing in the state he was living in. So he went round there and just said, "Oh look, on discount, 2 for 1, not being bought, all these toys rotting on shelves." It's like, and you're sat there going, "Oh, but why wouldn't anyone want to buy these Rose Tico items? Hey, children, hey, boys, don't you want a Finn action figure? This cowardly this cowardly individual who is obsessed with Rey and doesn't seem to have his own motivations. Come on, you want him, don't you?"
Yeah, who doesn't want to pretend to be the coward
And the comic relief who's a
or,
coward.
or the chubby girl? Yeah.
Oh, it's like,
The
hey,
characters were not even cool, not even a little bit.
the coolest was, let's think, the coolest was Finn. Oh, sorry, Poe. It was Poe Dameron.
Yeah.
But by the time of The Last Jedi, he's just berated and belittled even when he's right. And, you know, but if you put that toy right next to a toy of Vice Admiral Holdo, it's like, hey, children, just you can buy both these toys and then you can play act the scene where Vice Admiral Pinky berates him. It's like thrilling, just great. I mean, the nearest comparable character was Han Solo. But
Yes.
who wouldn't want to, which boy wouldn't want to play act the scene where Han Solo shoots Greedo first? Who wouldn't want to do that?
And
But
if you notice, they had to bring back to have some cool characters in the movies. They had to bring back the people from the original trilogy. They had to bring back Lando and Han Solo and Chewbacca. We need something cool, so instead of creating something cool, we'll just get these three guys back.
yeah, I think it almost worked. But Han Solo, he was a sorry character in The Force Awakens. he was a, you know, he was just. I think I agree with the internet, which has described him as like a deadbeat dad. You know, a divorced father who is, you know, smuggling stuff around the galaxy, and I don't know, maybe addicted to death sticks. I don't know. He's and this is really bizarre because he was a general in, you know, The Return of the Jedi. He's a war hero. He should be some higher up, some official, or some respected figure with some type of legacy, but instead he is just smuggling again.
It's so crazy that I'm putting some pieces together now. Doesn't it, his relationship with Princess Leia, doesn't it remind you of like the entitled bratty girl falls in love for the bad boy, and then they try to start a family, but she's still acting entitled, and he still wants to be independent, and so then he just says, "You know what? I can't deal with this." And he goes, "Honey, I'm going out for a pack of death sticks on a distant planet," and he just never comes back. And Julie, hop in the Millennium Falcon. Let's do it. Let's get back to smuggling.
Back to the old days of like no glory and just living from payment to payment.
Yeah, and who wants to? Princess Leia's character was bossy and opinionated, and in short bursts, it's charming to see them together. But you try and build a life around that, especially when there's no more conflict after the end of the trilogy, and he's going to take his badass self, and he's going to be like, I don't need to take my wife's shit anymore. I'm going to go back to smuggling.
I mean, I don't. I honestly don't like thinking about it because, you know, who. I mean, seriously though, because who, which Star Wars fan, like, you know, wanted to turn on the Force Awakens and see that Leia and Han were divorced and estranged, and Han was just back to his smuggling, and Princess Leia actually, she doesn't get it quite as bad, but in The Force Awakens, she's fighting the same battle. She really hasn't, you know, progressed anywhere. She's stuck. I mean,
She's bad at her job, yeah.
yeah, I mean, Han Solo reverts back to his former self, which was kind of cool, but at his age, it loses the charm. But
Yeah.
she's stuck fighting the same old battle. It's that's depressing. Like that's more depressing than what happens to Han, I think.
And I think what would have worked much better is if they were still together in some way. Because I mean, once a happy ending happens, and we want this of our fiction because we want it of our lives. Which is once a happy ending happens, you don't want to learn that 10 years later they got divorced and their lives are pretty crappy now, and their son grew up with emotional problems. You don't want to know that. You at least have some good, I don't want to say good problems if there's such a thing, but some problems that can be overcome, by the end of film, between them.
Yes, I mean, it's just I forgot what I was going to say. It's like no one wanted to see that, obviously. And oh, I remember what I was going to say. I mean, the typical response to this is like, "Oh, but don't you want your fiction to be more realistic?" And it's like, well, maybe not in this aspect, to be honest. I mean, I kind of liked these characters. I really don't like to see this. And then what they did to Luke was even worse.
Yes, it was.
I mean, I mean that was just the worst. I mean, if we ignore Solo: A Star Wars Story, where the writers and the actor stated that Lando Calrissian was now a pansexual, and then implied that he was doing something to a robot. If
Oh
we,
God.
yeah, if we ignore that, and it's fairly easy to ignore. If we ignore that, Lando got the best of it out of all of them, but Luke got the absolute worst. He was just turned into. a grumpy hermit who abdicated responsibility and who just drinks milk, which just should not be drunk at all.
Yeah, I agree. What they did to him was really horrible. And Luke has always kind of gotten a bad rap in the films, I feel like, because as a Jedi, he wasn't as great a Jedi as the others, as like at all. And then we learn in the film, I think it's in The Last Jedi, we learn that he's in charge of rebuilding the Jedi school, getting some new Jedi's, and under his watch it burns. And he just can't teach anyway. He was taught by the best. He can't seem to pass it on. And this is not, he's supposed to be the mentor of the main character. You know, he's supposed to guide them and teach them and then send them off to do great things. And he doesn't. He's as much a burden as he is a help.
I mean, I would actually disagree. He's not a burden, but he's not a help either. He's just there, and that's actually the ultimate insult. He's just there. The only thing he does which is helpful is distract the First Order, so the Resistance, the handful who remain, can escape.
And that was such a horrible piece of plot to put in there. It should not have gone down like that piece of plot right there.
There's like several things which are wrong with it. The first is that his plan was to distract so the Resistance could escape. But he doesn't tell anyone that's his plan. So as far as they know, he legitimately wants to take down the entirety of the First Order by himself. And since everyone has heard he's a living legend, why wouldn't you just sit back and go, oh, I'm going to get some popcorn, he's going to slaughter them all? I mean, if Poe hadn't figured it out, they'd have all been screwed royally. And Princess Leia didn't figure it out, so it's just like, what a great risk. You could have just at least said, hey guys, could you try and escape while I do battle, will you? And then the second problem is just how he dies. He's like, oh, force projection. Oh, so painful. I'm going to go to sleep. Dead.
It's such an insult to the character because they had everything. It's like they set up everything for him to be the Yoda, the same style mentor that he got. So, you know, he had a spaceship underwater, and you remember from his trilogy that he lifted a spaceship with his force powers. He could have taught Rey to do the same thing, but that never happened. And instead of, he could have, died in a lightsaber battle, kind of like Obi-Wan did against Darth Vader. That didn't happen. And he shouldn't have even been there to do the distraction thing in the first place because, and this is my most laughably bad moment of The Last Jedi, which is Finn. We'll talk about Finn for just a moment. His character arc it was cut to crap by the end of The Last Jedi, but he has a moment where he can stop being the coward and he can save everyone by flying his spaceship kamikaze style into the big siege cannon and about to kill everyone. And instead of continuing with that plot point and giving all the rest of the resistance or whatever they're called the chance to sneak out the back, they had nobody's favorite character, Rose Tico, crash him out of the sky. And why? Just let it happen.
It would have been good. I mean, I could just imagine an alternative. I might do this. An alternative cut where Finn he's charging at the cannon, and then he goes, "Wait, why can I hear laughing?" And just play Ryan Johnson's laugh in the background, while as Rose Tico just comes and smashes into his ship. And the line was just like the absolute worst. It was let's see, uh, This is
We're
how
gonna
we
win this war by. We're not gonna win this war by killing what we hate, but by saving what
saving
we
them.
love.
And then an unconsented kiss in there, just as the big gate is destroyed.
Yeah,
It's just like mwah, boom. And it's like it's like this is horrible.
yeah,
Oh,
and they had
that
they,
is so horrible when you think about it. It's twisted even because she kisses him right at the moment the resistance is doomed. At the precise moment the resistance is doomed. At the very moment she kisses him. It's so grossly inappropriate.
yes, and why from a storyteller perspective? Why just let this one character go down in a blaze of glory that will save everyone, and you have a satisfying ending. Instead, they want to bring Luke Skywalker back, and the image of him kind of just stands there and gets shot at. It's so anticlimactic.
Yeah, and he didn't even. And obviously, of course, there's no lightsaber fight between him and Kylo Ren. It's just him dodging for a couple of minutes and a bit of back and forth. Like, I think one of the worst Star Wars memes, which has come from The Last Jedi, is just the line where he says, um, "Interesting. Everything you have just said is wrong." And I say that because the people who use it, the people who use that meme, are so self-entitled and egotistical, and so self-assured in their own rightness that it's just not nice to see. The people who use that meme tend to be of the leftist persuasion, shall we say?
Yeah, they're pretty smug.
Yeah, there's this real smugness, and it's like, oh, thanks, Ryan. Thanks
Yeah.
for thanks for that.
And this whole point is just another example of we can't relate to it because we don't. If we could relate to it, we wouldn't want to. That's how bad it is. And you don't want that from any sort of story you consume. And so, in a way, it may be entirely possible now that I think about it. Maybe it is, you know, woke SJWs behind these films because they want to subvert some sort of whatever moral you walk out of the theater with, you know?
Well, Ryan Johnson certainly wanted to subvert everyone's expectations. He wanted to subvert the image and the sort of the myth of Luke Skywalker. I mean, Luke is just without explanation, he is irresponsible in The Last Jedi. So people have often compared Luke Skywalker to Logan slash Wolverine in Logan. And the reason they do that is because we see Wolverine in Logan, and he's in a bad way. You're like, oh goodness, what happened to him? But the film explains exactly why he's like that. So, have you seen Logan?
No, I have not, but I've heard it's pretty good.
I think it's a good film, actually. I mean, I find it useful for comparing to The Last Jedi in this respect because is a drunk now, and he's, kind of out of shape. He's down in the dumps, and it's like, okay, how did this happen to Wolverine? Well, you discovered that in the first few minutes that he's living in the middle of a desert somewhere between the United States and Mexico, and is he's living there alone with another mutant because I forget his name, but I'm going to call him Picard because the same actor plays him. Um, Picard, his character obviously has psychic powers, and as he got older, he started having seizures, and this made his psychic powers go wild, and they killed all the mutants except for the ones who could regenerate. So Logan and this other mutant, they take him to the middle of the desert, put him into this big disc thing, and they keep him on drugs to keep the seizures away and to stop him from harming other people. And Picard obviously resents this fact an awful lot. And but Wolverine isn't going to kill him because he loves Picard. So you can kind of see what's going on here. And of course, Wolverine needs to get the money for these drugs, so he's doing a lot of jobs to get these drugs. And you can see how that would wear some guy down over the years.
Yeah.
So by contrast, Luke accidentally cements Kylo Ren's turn to the dark side. He sees the temple destroyed when he wakes up, and rather than say to himself, okay, I've unleashed something on the world I really shouldn't, why don't I go and fix this? He just goes, oh, I'm gonna feel sorry for myself on an island and milk this alien thing and just, I don't want to be disturbed, but I'm going to leave a map to get so that people can find me for some reason.
Yeah, why the whole question, if you're gonna put so much effort into we have to find Luke. Luke is such an important character. At that point you have to make him worth the trouble. And we learn from his background that he's really not that great. It's like he might have been a fine Jedi, but he's got emotional problems now. And then on top of that, he can't even be a competent mentor. They don't write him as such. So the whole, now maybe not the whole plot of the Force Awakens, but everything, all that plot where they're trying to, we have to find Luke. In the end, we learned you really didn't have to find him. He didn't know how to do all that much.
Oh no, and Rey the Sioux, she didn't need him anyway. She was just, able to practice against a static rock and improve her lightsaber skills.
Yeah.
I mean, she really taught that rock a lesson. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, every single martial artist in the world wants to be able to do that, to get better by training against the rock that doesn't hit that.
They're just like, it's like, are you even going to... I mean, she doesn't even hit the rock until the end, so it'd be a bit like some boxer standing staring at a punching bag and just waving his arms around it and going, my skills have increased, and then they just step into a boxing ring and they murder whoever's against them.
Yeah, imagine if Mike Tyson stopped his punches right before they hit the bag.
Just like, and there's a YouTuber called Shadversity.
The Australian guy.
Yeah, the Australian swordsman. You've seen him then? You've seen his work?
I've seen him. He seems a little too left wing for my preference.
You should listen to his stuff on fencing and on martial arts though. He did one in on Rey's lightsaber skills. I think he did several videos actually. So yeah, he's good for that. But yeah, he was just talking about how stupid it was and how her stance was so wrong. Like, it's like you could just push her over with the way she's standing when she's mock attacking the rock.
Well, on that same note, I think you told me last time we spoke about Kylo Ren's stances.
Yeah, I was rewatching some of the footage, and I mean, first, it's just like it's coming on your point, which you made a while ago. He really does swing the lightsaber as if it's something heavy, like all the time. It's presumably it's a plasma blade, yet he's swinging it as if it's really, really heavy, which is something which we don't see in the other films. In the other films, they're treated as if they're really light weapons, but he's swinging it with like all his might all the time, practically. Whether it's in one hand or whether he's holding it in both hands, he's just swinging it. And a lot of his stances, I mean, it's a bit like he's holding a cricket bat, actually, and just preparing to hit with all his might, which works in cricket, but just looking at it, it's like, yeah, with the way he's telegraphing his strikes and he's moving his arm so far back, and often really low to the ground, it's just like a simple lunge would take him out.
Yeah, and think about the Yoda sword fight in that prequel. I forget which film it was in.
The Attack of the Clones, I think you're thinking of,
Yes, and
against Count
those,
Dooku, right?
yes, and he's flipping and flying all over the place. And he's like what, a foot and a half tall. So to have a 6 foot dude who's pretty jacked in the film, at least, he's struggling to swing something that weighs half a pound, probably.
Yeah, and he's just swinging it as if it's something really heavy, as if it's a bar of metal half the time. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's actually something which Rey does as well. She often swings the lightsaber as if it's kind of heavy, and it's less so than Kylo, but there's still that, and it's just like this doesn't really look very elegant. I think that's actually something really deeply wrong with the lightsaber fights, is that they don't look very elegant in the sequel trilogy. They just look they just look like people have got some sticks and they're whacking them together really hard.
yeah, and the fights are so boring.
Yeah, there's no melodrama, there's no skillful choreography, which is surprising considering that they could hire the best fencers, sword masters, whatever to teach these people, teach these actors, and choreograph something, but they just didn't bother for some reason.
It's doubly odd because I, if you've ever seen some '80s action movie, have you seen the movie Highlander?
I'm afraid not.
Okay, I don't blame you. Highlander was very popular in the '80s. It stars some guy that is totally forgettable, but the big name that was in the film was Sean Connery. And the film has a lot of sword fights because, as part of the plot, people have to cut off each other's heads. And there's a sword fight near the beginning of the film where two guys have katanas, and they're doing a sword fight, and this is just the absolute worst choreography for a sword fight. It's downright horrible. One of the good things about films now is that they put a lot of thought into the action. If you see a sword fight in most recent films, it's actually pretty decent for the most part. So for Star Wars to get the lightsaber battle wrong, it's unforgivable.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what they were thinking. It's just kind of emblematic in a way. They get a lot of things. They just don't seem to understand it, I suppose, is the best way of describing it.
Yes.
Because it's like it's kind of, they Disney buys Lucasfilm. I forget when they bought it, but they bought Lucasfilm some years back, and then they go, right, let's make a new Star Wars trilogy. Okay, what did people like about it? Oh, they liked the Empire, they liked X-wings. Oh, we'll bring them all in. It's like, couldn't we think of something new? No, no, just bring them all in. I mean, you could criticize the prequels, but when you watch the prequels, like I kid you not, the first scene of the Phantom Menace, the first opening set of scenes has more originality and more creative content than almost all of the sequel trilogy. Because by the time that the viceroys have said that they want to kill Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who were waiting for them in the negotiation room, we have seen a new type. We've seen the Trade Federation spaceships, which are a completely different design to anything we've seen yet in Star Wars. We see We see a ship which is similar to the ship we see in A New Hope, but it is different. And then we see battle droids. Battle droids haven't been seen before in Star Wars up until this point. And then, funnily enough, you actually have the first female droid in TC-13. So that silver C-3PO lookalike droid.
Okay.
And the reason that's funny is because when they were making Han Solo a Star Wars story, they kept saying that the female droid in that was the first ever female droid to appear in Star Wars. It's like, no, no. George Lucas beat you by about 15 years, which just makes it hilarious. But in that we just see new content. To contrast, The Force Awakens open and we see Star Destroyers, we see Stormtroopers, we see X-Wings, or an X-Wing. And it's just like, huh. Sorry?
Speaking of the originality of it, it's look, the parts that are original are bad, and the parts that are unoriginal they also get wrong. But going back to that Han Solo solo story, whatever it's called, with the female robot, and how they want to really play up. I forget what I saw online, but it seems I saw this funny review of Solo where it said all the good reviews of Solo love the female robot. And that's kind of all they love about it. But that female robot is voiced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yes.
And you may know that name recently because she was the writer brought on for the new James Bond film to make it less toxic masculinity or whatever it is. And it's the same Bond film that their Bond's replacement as 007 is a woman, and there's talk about can Bond ever be a woman? I think it's related. The SJW wokeness of it all, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge appears to, pun intended, to bridge that gap.
I actually didn't know she was writing for that. Yeah, she's I haven't seen Fleabags, but she sort of made her debate as a writer and actress in a series called Fleabags, and then for some reason they thought she'd be funny enough to play this female droid in Solo. And it's just like, okay. It's like, to be honest, like almost none of the characters were really likable in Solo, the Star Wars story.
No, they weren't, and I honestly, all of them unforgivable. And going back to what we were saying about the SJW element in the Star Wars film, it's stronger in Solo, the Solo story by far.
Stronger?
Oh yeah.
I'm inclined to disagree, but explain your case. I'm interested.
The main moment I'm thinking of that really cements it for me. Well, because for one thing, that female droid does it, and and then the Lando Calrissian pansexual thing relates to that. But the main moment I'm thinking of is there's a masked figure who goes around stealing whatever Han Solo is trying to steal. I forget that character's name.
Something Nest, I think, is the name, or at least the organization's called Something Nest, and she's sort of like the leader, but I can't remember her name.
Yeah. Well, she's a masked figure. We don't know who's behind the mask. And she comes in and she just starts kicking ass. She starts kicking ass a million ways. And by the end of the film, she's about to take her mask off. And I say to my wife, because we're watching it together, I say, I'll bet she weighs 100 pounds. Sure enough, she takes her mask off. She's a small woman. She can't weigh more than 110 pounds. And on top of that, there's a whole element of her. She's got darker skin, not quite dark though. It's kind of light, like she might be of a mixed race origin. And she's surrounded by dark-skinned people, and then the evil white oppressors are there, and it's supposed to be a whole metaphor for colonialism. On top of that, the 110-pound girl kicking the asses of all the guys is a metaphor for feminism. And I just said, look, whatever was good about this film, it just went right out the door. This is the most SJW thing I could possibly think of.
Ooh, I think you need to watch more films then. Oh, well, maybe not actually.
I just mean in the Star Wars.
You actually, you do remind me of that because I completely forgot she existed. I think the thing about her is that, again, she weighs like 110 pounds, and she's also really young as well. Like
Yes.
she's a young woman. If she was older, it would make more sense. It's like, okay, I mean, her beating up guys that big is ridiculous, but you know what? If she's old-ish, at least, like if she's in her 30s or 40s, maybe you know, I can understand how she might get men to follow her. Like, she'd
Like
be
Sarah Connor in Terminator 2.
something like that, an experienced woman who's seen it and who has worked their way up the ranks. But a person this young leading, it's just like, even if you just change the gender, it's still strange. It's like, how is someone this young commanding everyone? Who would follow someone that young into
Yeah, I mean,
battle?
not only that, if I still think if you had just take the sex out of it for a minute, if you had 110-pound male still beating up guys 3 times their size, I still think it's unbelievable. But when you make it a female, I think there's a propaganda purpose behind it. And especially with the whole imagery of the colonialism and that whole sequence near the end, it's definitely propaganda.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately, I mean, basically everything which comes out of Hollywood now is is up to the brim in like progressive messaging. And I mean, I know you said that it's not the progressive messaging which has really ruined Star Wars. But for most people I've seen, that's the thing they harp on about. That is the thing they clutch onto. Um, and the funny thing is that compared to you and me, the people who are complaining about the progressive stuff are probably more progressive than you and me, which is the ironic part because a lot of them like preface all their stuff by saying, "Oh, I'm not against strong, independent woman characters." Um, and I've basically expressed the sentiment in some videos, not related to Star Wars necessarily, but in other videos, I've expressed the sentiment of, "No, I don't really like this, and I don't really agree with it." Um, but but they're the ones who, ironically, are just strangely the most anti-progressive when it comes to Star Wars, and in some ways more progressive. It's really weird. I'm not sure how that works.
I don't either, but I think we should formally change topics here and start talking about SJW stuff in films in general because I think it's ripe for discussion and we can broaden it beyond Star Wars. What do you think?